In the year 2006, Bomberman returned in Bomberman Act Zero, a gritty dystopian reboot where Hudson Soft looked at their cute, colourful, family-friendly puzzle mascot and bizarrely decided he needed to be a tortured cyborg fighting in a rusted underground death match. But the real kicker is why it happened. You see, the Japanese executives at Hudson looked at the early 360 market and genuinely believed that Western gamers only wanted dark, edgy Call of Duty style violence. They thought this was the only way to sell games in America. In a later interview, John Grainer, the president of Hudson's American branch, admitted that the US team literally begged their Japanese bosses not to release it under the Bomberman name. They explicitly warned them, "Don't call it Bomberman, you're gonna piss people off." The Japanese executives completely ignored them, slapped the name on the box anyway, and well, the rest is history. Then, just 2 years later, Sega tried the exact same trick with Golden Axe Beast Rider. They wanted to bring the classic 16-bit beat-em-up into the HD era, but behind the scenes, the development at Secret Lab was an absolute disaster. Management prioritised the wrong things entirely. They were so uncomfortably obsessed with animating the main character Tyrus Flare's jiggle physics, blood-splattered skin and unlockable skimpy bikinis that they literally forgot to build a functioning combat system. They spent months on her outfits while the actual collision detection was left completely broken, resulting in a game where enemies would just stand around waiting to be hit. It bombed so hard that Sega shut the entire studio down shortly after. But you probably knew about those ones already, right? Well, don't you worry, because today we're digging much deeper. We're looking at several other legendary franchises that completely failed a modern reboot. And for the most part, you got some seriously stupid reasons in here. We're talking about lost source codes, toxic studio cultures, and corporate development mandates so utterly baffling that they permanently put their iconic series into the ground. Welcome to Slope's Game Room. Let's not fanny about, let's keep it in the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 era and look at a game that failed for the complete opposite reasons that Bomberman Act Zero failed. Well, kind of. If you grew up playing the notoriously gory horror-themed Splatterhouse games from the 16-bit era, like I did, you no doubt remember the main character Rick, the Friday the 13th looking rip-off complete with hockey mask and a carefree walk cycle that gave off the impression that he was down by the lake feeding the ducks. Well, fast forward to the 360 and PlayStation 3 era, and Namco decided to bring it back.
Make a wish? Okay. I want us to be together until the end of the world.
Jenny! I'm sorry. She doesn't have to die. I can help you. I can heal your wounds. We can save her if you trust me, if you put me on. What have you done to me? What am I? What am I?
Namco's mandate was incredibly simple. Give us a gritty, heavy metal, blood-soaked pick-up-and-play brawler. Bottle Rocket had previously made an action game called Rise of the Kasai for Sony, so they seemed perfectly equipped to handle a game like this. And the studio worked on the game for the next 18 months. However, during that time, the relationship between the development studio and the publisher Namco started to break down. In early 2009, Namco abruptly announced that they were firing Bottle Rocket and pulling the game away from them. Namco abruptly yanked the development kits and publicly cited performance issues as the reason why. Obviously this looked terrible to the gaming press, as per usual. It looked like the big evil publisher had bullied a small studio, with some reports saying that the game wasn't anime enough as being the real reason that it was getting shut down. Because of this, Bottle Rocket went on the offensive, and when speaking to GameSpot, they said,
"We too have to be careful on what we say, since publishers have to worry about their image and will sue small independent studios who bark back at them too loudly. Splatterhouse had been in development for over 18 months, and up to having the title taken away from us, we had not missed any contractual defined milestones. So either there were no performance issues during that time frame, or Namco's management of the title was inept."
So if Bottle Rocket were hitting those milestones, why was the game taken away from them, and why did that relationship break down? Because the studio director was hiding the real game from the publisher. Yeah. Thanks to a massive deep dive investigation by Polygon years later, the truth finally came out. It wasn't the publisher's fault this time, it was Bottle Rocket director Jay Beard. He had completely disagreed with Namco's mandate for a simple brawler. He wanted to recycle the complex targeting mechanics from his previous game Rise of the Kasai, and ordered the art team to stray far away from the classic Splatterhouse designs that Namco was expecting. But because he knew Namco would hate it, he actively hid it from them. Whenever Namco corporate suits flew out to visit the studio, the director would quickly scramble to find any random assets lying around that matched Namco's original mandate, essentially putting on a fake puppet show. But as soon as those executives left the building, he would tell his team to ignore the publishers and go right back to building his unauthorized version of the game. But you can't hide video game development from the publishers for too long, because eventually when those builds were compiled and sent over to Namco, when Namco booted them up, they realised that they were getting lied to. It was nowhere near finished. The combat was wrong, and the studio had disastrously chosen to build it on the notoriously clunky Game Brio engine, meaning that the PlayStation 3 version was incredibly hard to port. Once the game was yanked from Bottle Rocket didn't last much longer. It only took a couple of months before the studio shut its doors for good. But surprisingly, a few months after that, Namco invited some of the workers that had worked on that game back to work on Splatterhouse again. There was genuine talent at the studio, but in hindsight, yeah, the publisher knew best. Well, actually, you know what? I suppose that does come down to personal taste. For me, when looking back at the original Splatterhouse games, they've always been hard, but simple to understand and crazy gory. And that's what the remake should have been from the get-go. What we ended up getting was a Frankenstein mess of fixing what had already been done using parts of what was left by the Bottle Rocket team, injected with another team who worked on the original Afro Samurai game. The end result? I mean, honestly, I didn't mind it too much. I think it's one of those examples of me loving the original so much that I kind of forced myself to like this remake more than I probably would have done. It's not terrible, but it could have been so much more if they did less. Now it's just seen as that game that completely killed the franchise. Shadowrun. If you're a fan of the cyberpunk genre, you probably have a soft spot for the Shadowrun series. Starting off as a tabletop RPG before being released on multiple systems by multiple developers, most entries offer something for every kind of player. It's a deep, rich, story-driven world that basically begs for a massive, atmospheric, single-player experience. So, naturally, when Microsoft got their hands on the IP to build a modern reboot for the Xbox 360 and PC, they looked at that incredible lore, all of those years of tabletop history, and decided that the best way to honour all of this was to throw it in the bin and make a first-person shooter. Yeah, turns out the guys over at Microsoft had different plans for the Shadowrun series, which is so bizarre because if there ever was a franchise that would be brilliant as a story-driven game, it would be Shadowrun. But nope, they didn't care about any of that. They didn't care about the lore, they didn't care about the RPG mechanics, and they definitely didn't care about the fans, which is obviously why it didn't do as well as it should have done. So, that's this chapter over and done with, right? It failed because they changed it too much. Hang on. Yes, they changed it and that's the reason it failed, but the big question is, why did they change it? Well, it was done in order to sell more copies of Windows Vista. Yep, you heard me right. This wasn't some cool and fresh new creative vision for the franchise, it was done to sell more Vista keys. You see, Microsoft was preparing to launch the Windows Vista operating system at the same time, along with their highly unpopular Games for Windows Live service. And they were desperate for a flagship title to prove that PC players and Xbox 360 players could actually play together online. So the Microsoft executives decided to tell the devs to gut the story-driven RPG mechanics entirely and instead make a Counter-Strike clone. It was a total disaster. PC players were livid because those that actually wanted to play it couldn't unless they physically upgraded to the resource-heavy Windows Vista operating system. An operating system that most people at the time absolutely hated. The game was a commercial and critical dud. Microsoft didn't even try to save it. They just liquidated the studio, and FASA, the developers behind the RPG books who had been looking after the IP for years, was shut down just months after the game launched. Still, not all that bad, eh? I'm sure they did sell some copies of Vista. Oh no, wait, lucky for the gamers, as hackers worked out how to crack the game, allowing it to be played on Windows XP instead. God damn, Vista was so crap. Right, let's move on to a franchise that's responsible for the biggest wow factors of my gaming life. Command & Conquer. Boy oh boy did this franchise blow me away when I was younger. Multiple times in fact, from the realization that you was playing something that at the time felt wholly unique to the PC format, to the first time I ever played and failed online. The Command & Conquer franchise will always hold a special place in my heart. Plus, bringing it up again on this channel means that I get to play this. God, it's just so good. Those original games did wonders, building up the half cheesy, half serious world of the cinematics, the base building, one of the most iconic villains in gaming history, Kane. Fans have been waiting over a decade for a grand, epic conclusion to the Tiberian storyline. But forget all that for now, because behind closed doors at EA Los Angeles, the developers weren't actually building the game that fans were expecting. They were secretly working on a completely different, highly experimental free-to-play arena game targeted specifically at the Asian internet cafe market. I mean, look, not great, but at the same time, it's not a proper sequel to the classic games. It's a spin-off. If you really need to make a crappy internet cafe spin-off for the Asian market, do it. Just make sure it's obviously not a sequel. I think we all know where this is going. Yep, halfway through production, the suits at EA looked at their quarterly spreadsheets, panicked, and then realised that they didn't have a major boxed retail release for the Western market that year. So they did the most corporate thing imaginable. They marched into the studio and ordered them to slap a number 4 onto that Asian internet cafe game box. The developers were forced to shoehorn in a storyline into a game engine that it just wasn't designed for. They stripped out everything that made the series great, the base building, the resource gathering, and the satisfying massive army production, and replaced it with a bizarre squad-based arena combat system that belonged in a completely different genre. It was essentially Dawn of War 2, which again is fine. Dawn of War 2 was a good game, I remember enjoying that. But it should have been a spin-off. This is not what classic Command & Conquer fans wanted. It took one of PC gaming's most beloved legacies and turned it into a laughingstock overnight. The game bombed so spectacularly compared to those before it that it became one of the final nails in the Command & Conquer coffin. Right, let's talk about a game that, technically isn't a reboot, and thankfully it didn't kill the franchise, but the reason for its failure is just so stupid that I couldn't not add it to this video. Silent Hill 2 and 3 are absolute masterpieces of PlayStation 2 psychological horror. They are famous for their thick fog engines that hid the hardware limitations of the PlayStation 2 while creating an unforgettable, suffocating atmosphere. In 2012, Konami decided to remaster these two crown jewels of the HD generation. They handed the project to a small team to get the job done, and everyone expected a simple, high-definition polish of those original games. But when the developers cracked open the archives to start work on this HD collection, they hit a brick wall that they technically should never have hit. Yeah, turns out the final game's source code was lost. Turns out that Konami's internal file management system was a complete joke for the time, so much so that they lost the source codes for both Silent Hill 2 and 3. Instead of the finished, polished master files, Konami handed the developers a bunch of heavily bugged, incomplete beta builds from months before the games originally launched in the early 2000s. The team had to waste massive amounts of development time just trying to refix ancient code errors that the original developers had already solved a decade prior. Worse still, they couldn't figure out how to replicate the original complex fog shaders onto modern hardware. When the game launched, the iconic chilling fog was replaced by a flat grey wall, which completely exposed the edges of the unrendered map and ruined the entire horror aesthetic. Plus, to add insult to injury, they accidentally replaced the game's iconic, unsettling text fonts with the kid-friendly Comic Sans. No, I'm not joking. It was a complete butchering of gaming history. Thankfully, it didn't kill the franchise, like I said, but it turned one of the most respected horror series on the planet into a laughingstock. It's the ultimate cautionary tale. If you're a multi-billion-dollar publisher, maybe, just maybe, try to keep a backup copy of your own games. Hey there guys, thanks for checking out the video. This is the part of the video, as usual, where I give a massive shout out to all of my patrons, all of my YouTube members, with an extra big shout out going to the following: Vike Echo, Livestream, Hagatimo84, Stephen Hefner, already messing this up, Dina81, Kematura Villarreal, Derekuda, Enraged Gecko, Ian Quell, Mind of the Unsane, XZX, Andrew Dalton, Bram Perez, British Video Game Nerd, Carolan, Stephen, Chevmatic, Chris aka Brackman, Conrad Constantine, The Action Saxon, Dina, Insidious Bliss, Jay is Manchild, Jabba Al Aiden, Jeff Mianowski, Livestream, Mass Replay, Mike Fallon, Nicholas Bertner, Patrick Grip Jansen, Paul Float, Richard Algigic, Shadow Dragon, Swift Justice Peterson, The Sneaky Ferret, Vitas Varnezin, Ye Old Hamburglar. Thank you guys so much for your support, as always. The most important thing you can do is hit the subscribe button. All us YouTubers constantly ask you, and it's, I know, very annoying, but without a doubt, you know, if you can't support the show financially like all of these incredible people here do, allow me to make these videos every week, just hitting that subscribe button. If you want to go the extra step, the bell, the hype button, the comment section, the sharing, all that jazz, but hitting the subscribe button is without a doubt the most important thing. Thank you guys so much. A lot of you guys are doing that these days, and yeah, I mean, these videos take an incredibly long time, so just hitting that button really does help, and it helps more than you know actually push the video out to more people. So thank you guys so much if you are able to do that. But anyway, this is the part of the video where I end the video and say thank you guys for watching, and hopefully I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.
Here it is, a groove slightly transformed. Just a bit of a break from the norm. Just a little something to break the monotony of all that hardcore dance that has gotten to be a little bit out of control. It's cool to dance, but what about a groove that soothes and moves romance? Give me a soft, subtle mix, and if it ain't broke, then don't try to fix it.